How accurate is it in its presentation of Queen Charlotte as an obvious woman of colour? Is it true that your book, People of Colour and the Royals, was one of their sources for proving that she was indeed a woman of colour? Please don't ignore this. I think I speak for all Bridgerton fans when I say your input will be invaluable.
Something shifted this week, and it is difficult to ignore. The trigger was not a headline or an official statement, but a series of personal images. Photos shared on Instagram by Chelsy Davy showing her growing family and the life she has built. On the surface, they were simple moments. A new child, a happy home, a sense of stability. But the reaction they generated and the context surrounding them has turned those images into something far more significant. Chelsy Davy has now welcomed her third child, and the response online was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. People were not just reacting to the news itself, but to what it represented. She appears settled, content, and far removed from the turbulence that once surrounded her public life. She has built a successful business, created a private family life, and, by most visible measures, is thriving. That alone would not usually be remarkable. What gives it weight is the history. For years, Chelsy Davy was closely linked to Prince Harry, and their relationship was widely understood to be serious. According to accounts from those familiar with that period, they did not just share a casual connection, but had meaningful conversations about the future, including the kind of life they wanted to build. Among those discussions was the idea of having a large family, something Harry himself reportedly expressed as a genuine desire at the time. That detail has resurfaced now in a way that invites comparison, because in the years that followed, Harry publicly framed his views on family very differently, emphasizing a more limited approach and connecting those decisions to broader concerns about the world.
A source close to the matter has told the UK Telegraph that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle could lose their bid for taxpayer-funded security in the UK due to concerns of a public backlash.
For some observers, the contrast between those earlier private conversations and later public statements has raised questions about how much his perspective changed and why. At the same time, Chelsy Davy's life appears to reflect the path that had once been discussed. She has built that larger family, created distance from the pressures of royal life, and established herself independently. There is no indication, publicly at least, that she remains connected to that earlier chapter. Instead, what is visible is a life that has moved forward, shaped by different choices and a different environment. That contrast has become part of the conversation. It is not about nostalgia or unresolved feelings on her side, but about how two people who once shared similar ideas about the future ended up on entirely different paths. For Harry, whose personal life has been under intense scrutiny in recent years, moments like this inevitably draw attention, not because of what is said directly, but because of what they appear to highlight indirectly. Images can carry that kind of weight. They do not explain anything on their own, but they invite interpretation, especially when placed alongside a well-known history. In this case, they have reopened discussion about decisions made years ago and the direction those decisions ultimately led. Before drawing conclusions, however, it is important to consider how that earlier relationship was understood by those closest to it. Accounts from individuals who spent time around Harry during that period, including biographers who documented his life in detail, suggest that the reasons for the relationship ending were more complex than a single turning point. They point to differences in lifestyle, expectations, and the pressures that came with being part of the royal environment.
Harry is heartbroken all over again. Now, of course, this is something that he is never going to admit publicly, especially as his marriage to Meghan Markle crumbles.
Those factors matter when looking back at what might have been, because while it is easy to frame the present as a comparison between two outcomes, the reality is shaped by choices, circumstances, and constraints that existed at the time. What is visible now is only the result, not the full context of how it came to be. Something shifted this week, and it is difficult to ignore. The moment itself was simple, almost ordinary. A series of photos shared by Chelsy Davy showing her growing family and the life she has built. Yet the reaction to those images quickly moved beyond the personal, turning into a wider conversation shaped by memory, contrast, and timing. Chelsy has now welcomed her third child, and the response online was overwhelmingly positive. People were not just reacting to the announcement, but to what it symbolized. She appears settled, fulfilled, and far removed from the intensity that once surrounded her public life. With a successful business, a private home life, and a growing family, she presents a picture of stability that resonates. On its own, that would not be unusual. What gives it significance is the history attached to it. For years, Chelsy Davy was closely associated with Prince Harry, and their relationship was widely understood to be serious. Those familiar with that period have described conversations that went beyond the present, including discussions about the kind of future they wanted. Among those plans was the idea of a larger family.
Former close friends of the Duke have told me that Chelsy Davy's decision to have a third child has really emotionally hit home.
Something Harry himself reportedly spoke about openly at the time. That detail has taken on new meaning in light of what followed. In later years, Harry publicly expressed a different perspective, emphasizing a smaller family and connecting that view to broader global concerns. For observers, the contrast between those earlier private intentions and later public positions has raised questions about how and why that shift occurred. At the same time, Chelsy's current life appears to reflect the path that had once been discussed. She has built a larger family, stepped away from the pressures tied to royal life, and created a space that is distinctly her own. There is no visible indication that she remains tied to the past. Instead, everything about her public presence suggests forward movement and independence. It is that contrast that has drawn attention. This is not a story about lingering attachment or unresolved emotions on her side, but rather about how two people who once shared similar ideas ended up in very different places. For Harry, whose life continues to be examined closely, moments like this inevitably invite interpretation, even when nothing is said directly. Images in situations like this carry a quiet kind of weight. They do not provide answers, but they encourage reflection, especially when they intersect with a well-known history. In this case, they have reopened a broader conversation about decisions made years ago and the directions those decisions ultimately shaped. Still, it is important to recognize that the past was never as simple as it might appear in hindsight. Accounts from those who observed that relationship closely, including biographers and insiders, suggest that its end was influenced by a combination of factors: lifestyle differences, expectations, and the pressures that come with proximity to the royal institution. Those elements complicate any straightforward comparison between what was once imagined and what exists now. At a certain point, it becomes difficult to maintain the appearance that everything is fine. That tension was visible during the Windsor walkabout, just days after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, a moment that was meant to project unity during one of the most solemn periods in recent royal history. While the public saw a composed and coordinated appearance, accounts from behind the scenes suggest something very different. According to reports and analysis from a televised documentary, there was visible strain between Prince William and Prince Harry even before they stepped in front of the cameras. A lip reader reviewing the footage interpreted a brief exchange in which William appeared frustrated, questioning why they were standing together in that moment. Harry, in response, attempted to engage, but the interaction did not reflect ease or reconciliation. Instead, it suggested unresolved tension that had carried into a highly sensitive public setting. What stood out was not just the disagreement itself, but the timing. This was a moment intended to honor the late Queen and reassure the public, yet the atmosphere behind the scenes appeared strained. Observers have pointed out that Catherine, Princess of Wales, seemed to take on a stabilizing role, maintaining composure and helping to keep the situation from escalating further in front of the cameras. Additional reports surrounding that same event added to the perception of disorganization. There were claims that Meghan had considered making a separate appearance with her own media arrangements, a move that, if accurate, would have conflicted with the unified approach expected for such an occasion. That plan reportedly did not proceed, but the suggestion alone contributed to the sense that coordination behind the scenes was far from smooth. Delays and last-minute adjustments were also mentioned in various accounts, further complicating what was already a carefully managed public moment. For those closely observing, these details reinforced a broader narrative of internal friction during a time when cohesion was particularly important. That pattern of perception extended beyond royal events. At the One Young World Conference in Manchester, Meghan was given a prominent platform in front of an international audience that included activists, leaders, and young changemakers. It was widely seen as an opportunity to address broader global issues and connect with a diverse audience. Reactions to the speech, however, were mixed. Some observers felt that the focus remained heavily centered on personal experiences rather than expanding outward to the themes expected for that setting. Critics argued that the message did not fully align with the scale of the platform, while others defended the approach as consistent with her established speaking style. What is clear is that moments like these have contributed to an evolving public perception. For some commentators, they represent missed opportunities at critical points, while for others, they reflect differences in communication style rather than deeper issues. The interpretation often depends on perspective, but the reactions themselves have become part of the broader narrative. When viewed together, these events have fueled ongoing discussion about Harry's current position. Rather than being seen as isolated incidents, they are often grouped into a larger story about adjustment, pressure, and the challenges of navigating a very public life after stepping away from a structured institution. For those who have followed his trajectory over time, the question is less about any single moment and more about how those moments connect. Accounts from those who have studied Prince Harry's life closely suggest that many of the challenges being discussed today did not emerge suddenly, but have deeper roots. Biographer Angela Levin has described how, from a young age, Harry required significant support and guidance, with Princess Diana reportedly working hard to help him navigate emotional difficulties. These early struggles are often referenced as part of a broader effort to understand his later decisions, rather than as a simple explanation for them. After his time in the military, Harry was presented with a range of opportunities that could have shaped a long-term role centered on service and public engagement. However, his departure from active deployment, particularly after security concerns arose, marked a turning point. While the decision was made for safety reasons, reports suggest that he found the outcome difficult to accept, and his response reflected a sense of frustration rather than closure. That period appears, in hindsight, to have been a moment of transition. Some observers believe it was a time when a more clearly defined path could have been established, while others argue that the pressures surrounding his role made that process more complicated than it appeared from the outside. What is clear is that the choices made during that phase influenced the direction that followed. When Meghan Markle entered his life, the dynamic shifted again. Supporters of the couple have described their relationship as one that provided Harry with a sense of independence and a break from long-standing constraints. Critics, however, argue that it may have reinforced existing frustrations rather than resolving them. As with many aspects of their story, interpretations vary depending on perspective. Harry himself has spoken publicly about feeling aware of his position within the royal family, particularly in relation to the line of succession. There was a recognition that his role, while significant, existed within a structure that would eventually shift focus toward the next generation. For some, this awareness added urgency to his desire to define a distinct identity. For others, it highlighted the difficulty of balancing personal ambition with institutional expectations. In recent years, public appearances have been closely scrutinized, with commentators offering differing views on his demeanor and engagement. Some see signs of strain, while others caution against drawing firm conclusions from limited observations. What remains consistent is the level of attention placed on his actions, with even minor moments becoming part of a larger narrative. At the same time, media reports have continued to explore the future of the couple's public and professional trajectory. One such report, published by a major U.S. outlet, referenced discussions within the publishing world about potential future projects, including the possibility of personal accounts reflecting on their experiences. These reports remain speculative, but they have contributed to ongoing debate about how their story may continue to unfold. Alongside that, long-standing advice reportedly given to Harry by those close to him has resurfaced in public discussion. Concerns about distance, family dynamics, and long-term implications of major life decisions have been revisited as part of a broader conversation about the path he chose and where it may lead. What makes the current situation even more complex is the legal and personal reality surrounding Harry's life in California. In the event of a divorce, legal experts often point out that family courts in the state tend to prioritize stability for children, which can result in arrangements that keep them primarily where they are already based. While every case is different, the possibility of limited flexibility around custody is something that has been widely discussed, and it adds another layer of pressure to an already complicated situation. For Harry, that reality carries weight. It introduces the possibility that major personal decisions could have long-term consequences, not just for him, but for his relationship with his children. That kind of consideration can influence how far someone is willing to push in a difficult situation, especially when the outcome is uncertain. At the same time, media speculation about future developments continues to circulate. Reports have suggested that potential publishing projects reflecting on personal experiences could emerge at some point, although none of this has been confirmed. Still, the idea of private details becoming public is enough to keep the conversation active, particularly given how much attention previous accounts have already received. Alongside these personal concerns, there is also an ongoing public dispute that has drawn significant attention. Harry's efforts to secure official protection in the United Kingdom have become a matter of legal and political debate. Government representatives have argued that his current status does not warrant the same arrangements he once had, while Harry has maintained that security remains a serious concern for him and his family. What complicates that argument is the broader context. He has traveled internationally on multiple occasions without the same level of protection he is requesting, leading critics to question how risk is being assessed. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that security considerations can vary depending on location and circumstances. The issue remains unresolved, but it continues to shape public perception. Taken together, these elements create a picture that is difficult to simplify. On one side, there is a past relationship that has clearly moved on, with Chelsy Davy building a life that reflects stability, privacy, and personal success. On the other, there is Harry navigating a set of challenges that span personal, legal, and public domains, all under intense scrutiny. The contrast between those two paths has become part of the broader narrative, not as a definitive judgment, but as a reflection of how different choices can lead to very different outcomes over time. What is visible now is not just a moment, but the accumulation of years of decisions, circumstances, and shifting priorities. And that is why this story continues to draw attention. Because it is not just about what happened in the past, but about how those decisions continue to unfold in real time. What do you think? Are these just normal consequences of stepping away from royal life, or something much bigger playing out? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more deep dives like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen.